Have you ever been watching, like, a professional mixed martial arts match? You know the scene, right? The arena lights are glaring down on the cage. The crowd is just absolutely roaring at every single punch.
Oh, yeah, it's a huge spectacle.
Right. But you find yourself wondering, okay, these athletes are incredible, but would any of this actually work if a fight broke out in, I don't know, a narrow, slippery alleyway against multiple people?
It's basically the ultimate martial arts dilemma, you know? You watch these highly tuned athletes competing under a really rigid set of rules.
Yeah.
They're on a soft canvas mat with a referee standing like 2 feet away, ready to jump in. And naturally, you have to question how much of that carefully orchestrated sport translates to the absolute chaos of an unprepared real-world confrontation.
Where there are no weight classes.
Exactly. No weight classes and definitely no bells to save you.
Well, that massive gap between gritty, real-world survival and safe, regulated sports competition is the entire focus of our deep dive today.
That's a fascinating topic.
It really is. We are looking into a system called Real Martial Art, or RMA. It's an integrated combat system founded by Tarek Ibrahim, who is also known as Tarek Vandam.
Right.
So our mission today is to figure out how RMA attempts to bridge that gap. And we have an amazing stack of sources to pull from, including the Real Martial Art Federation's official philosophy documents, their combat rules, their highly specific refereeing regulations, and their belt promotion program.
And, you know, what becomes immediately clear when you read through these documents is that before you can even look at RMA as a sport, you really have to understand the reality it's preparing the practitioner to face.
A street reality.
Right. Their literature is uncompromising about their core objective outside of the tournament structure. They literally call it survival first.
Which, I mean, survival first sounds kind of like a marketing slogan at first glance, but the documents define it as this radical departure from the mindset of a traditional combat sport.
Totally.
In a tournament, the goal is to dominate your opponent, to score points, to win the round, and, you know, ideally to get a knockout. But in RMA's real-world philosophy, the ultimate objective is simply to escape the situation with the least possible harm to yourself.
And that fundamentally changes the tactical approach. When you are fighting to win a trophy, you're willing to engage, right? You want to trade blows, stay in the pocket.
Yeah, you want to put on a show.
Exactly. But when your goal is simply to survive and escape, prolonged engagement is basically your worst enemy.
Right.
The sources detail the specific worst-case scenarios they base this on. Things like sudden ambushes, fighting against multiple opponents at once, threats involving edged weapons, and fighting in confined, awkward spaces like a narrow street or a cramped stairwell.
I was actually thinking about it like this. Traditional combat sports are essentially a high-stakes physical debate.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
Right. You have agreed-upon rules, you take turns asserting your skills, there's a designated space for it. But RMA's approach to street survival is more like trying to find the emergency exit in a burning building.
Yeah.
You weren't sticking around to fight the fire just to look tough, you just want to get out alive. But, okay, that brings up a major question for me. How do you actually train a student for that? I mean, you can't just put them on a mat and politely ask them to pretend they're being attacked with a broken bottle.
No, you can't. And that is where their methodology gets very interesting, specifically their focus on what they term stress training.
Stress training?
Right. The documents acknowledge that learning a physical technique is really only half the battle. The real challenge is maintaining psychological control under intense pressure.
Because your body just takes over.
Exactly. When a human being is suddenly attacked, the sympathetic nervous system dumps adrenaline into the bloodstream. It triggers that classic fight-or-flight response.
And that completely alters your physical capabilities, doesn't it? Like you lose fine motor skills.
You lose fine motor skills. You experience auditory exclusion, where you literally stop hearing things around you.
Yeah.
And, you get tunnel vision.
Wow.
So stress training in RMA is designed to artificially induce that panic state in a controlled environment, often through physical exhaustion drills combined with sudden, unexpected attacks from multiple angles.
Oh, man.
Yeah, the goal is to force the practitioner to rely on gross motor skills and fast, decisive reactions, even when they are just utterly terrified.
And the documents also talk extensively about environmental awareness, because if you're in a sterile gym, you only have your fists and your feet. But if you're in a restaurant or an alley, that survival first mandate teaches you to use surrounding objects as defensive tools.
Like what?
Well, like throwing a jacket over an attacker's knife hand or putting a chair between you and the threat.
Right, which goes right back to the core psychology of the system. Teaching someone to use the environment to neutralize a threat quickly, specifically so they can escape, rewires their situational awareness.
Yeah.
They walk into a room and unconsciously note the exits and potential barriers. They aren't looking for the perfect angle to land a spinning kick, you know. They're looking for the fastest way to create a 3-second window of opportunity to get out of that confined space safely.
But, okay, this brings us to a huge contradiction in the material. We just established this brutal, pragmatic, survivalist philosophy where there are no rules and the goal is just to escape. Yet RMA is also an international sport.
It is.
It has tournaments, it has medals, and audiences. I have to wonder, how on earth do you take a system engineered for surviving a knife ambush and sanitize it into a fair, televised sport without the athletes severely injuring each other?
That is the central engineering problem of RMA as a sport.
Yeah.
I mean, if you make it too safe, it ceases to be real and loses its survival value.
Right.
But if you make it too real, it's no longer a sport, it's just assault. Their solution to this is the RMA bout structure, which they outline in intense detail. It's arguably one of the most unique formats in modern combat sports.
The rulebook calls it a 3-round format, but it's honestly more like a 3-stage crucible.
Yeah, that's a great description.
Let's look at the mechanics of this because it completely breaks the mold of what you see on TV. First, the duration of the fights is strictly partitioned by age and experience.
Okay.
So cadets fighters who are 10 to 14 years old fight very brief 1.5-minute rounds. Amateurs fight 3-minute rounds, and professionals fight 5-minute rounds. Everyone gets a standard 1-minute rest in between. But here's the catch. The rules of engagement change entirely from round to round.
It forces a really strict modular progression. In round 1, the fight is entirely dedicated to striking.
Okay.
Fighters are only permitted to use punches and kicks. Ground fighting is strictly prohibited. If an athlete takes their opponent down, or even if someone just slips, the referee immediately intervenes, stops the clock, and stands them back up.
So for the first round, you are essentially watching a pure kickboxing match.
Pretty much cat.
But the bell rings, they take their 1-minute break, and when they step out for round 2, the rulebook flips upside down. Round 2 is exclusively grappling. Wrestling and jiu-jitsu are the only legal moves. All striking is prohibited.
Wow.
Yeah, if you are the fighter, you cannot throw a single punch or kick, even to defend a takedown.
And we have to look closely at a critical limitation built into this second round. Once the fighters hit the ground, the clock starts ticking on a very short leash.
Right.
Ground engagement is limited to exactly 30 seconds. If no effective action, positional advancement, or submission attempt occurs within that half-minute window, the referee stops the action and forces both fighters back to a standing position to restart the grappling sequence.
I want to challenge this entire structure, though, because if the mandate of RMA is survival first and preparing for the chaos of the street, this rigid segregation of skills seems completely counterintuitive to me.
Oh, so?
Well, a real fight doesn't have a striking round and a grappling round. Imagine you're an athlete who is a phenomenal striker. You dominate round 1, picking your opponent apart. Then round 2 starts, and suddenly you are artificially handicapped. You aren't allowed to strike to keep them away. You just have to let them grapple you. Doesn't that enforce bad habits for a real-world survival scenario?
I see what you mean. It seems counterintuitive on the surface, but if you look at the pedagogical intent, it is actually a brilliant piece of athletic conditioning.
Okay, lay it on me.
The 3-round structure isn't trying to simulate a street fight in the first 2 rounds, it's forcing the isolation of skills to prevent the fighter from developing a crutch.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, in many open combat sports, if a fighter has a devastating overhand right, they'll just use it to cover up their terrible wrestling defense. They hide their weaknesses behind their one great strength.
So by forcing them into a grappling-only round, you are stripping away their favorite weapon.
Exactly. You are forcing them into the deep end of their weakest discipline. It builds a tactically disciplined athlete. Because, you know, all of this is just preparation for round 3.
Right, the final round.
Round 3 is open combat. Everything is legal. Striking, takedowns, ground fighting, and submissions, it's full mixed martial arts. When an RMA fighter reaches round 3, they aren't just brawling defensively. The Crucible has forced them to consciously engage both their striking and their grappling systems independently under pressure.
Yeah, so they're balanced.
Right. So when they are combined, the athlete can seamlessly transition between them.
And to your point about the 30-second rule on the ground in round 2 at first, I thought that was just to keep the sport entertaining for the crowd so they don't get bored.
That's what most people think.
Yeah, but looking at the survival first documents, going to the ground in a street fight is incredibly dangerous. If you take someone down, their friends might jump in and kick you in the head.
That is precisely the connection. The 30-second ground limit installs a psychological timer in the fighter's head. It teaches urgency.
Yeah.
If you go to the ground, you have a few seconds to submit the threat. If you can't, you need to get back on your feet immediately so you can survey the environment and escape. It prevents the habit of resting on the mat, which is, well, a luxury you only have in a regulated sport.
The scoring system reflects this hybrid approach perfectly, too. If you're watching an open combat round, the judges award 1 point for a clean technical punch, a body kick, or a clean takedown. But you get 2 points for a head kick or a knee to the head. Though there's a strict caveat that you cannot pull the opponent into a clinch to land that knee. And submissions, of course, end the bout immediately.
However, there's a massive safety parameter in round 3 that we cannot ignore.
What's that?
While almost everything is legal, striking a grounded opponent is entirely prohibited.
Oh, really?
You can take them down, you can grapple them, and you can apply a joint lock or a choke, but you cannot rain down punches or kicks once they are on the mat.
Which severely limits the risk of the brutal head trauma and lacerations we see in typical MMA. It's a compromise. It allows the realistic blending of skills standing up, but caps the physical damage on the ground.
And managing that compromise requires absolute authority. When you have a third round where explosive striking and complex submissions are happening simultaneously, you cannot have a casual approach to the rules.
No, definitely not.
The officiating system in RMA is designed like a meticulously structured bureaucracy just to manage that chaos safely.
It is wild to read through the official team requirements. I mean, you think of a fight as 2 athletes and a referee, but RMA requires a massive cast.
It really does.
Inside the ring, you have the referee. On the outside, you have 4 judges, a timekeeper, a scorekeeper, a supervisor, and the ringside doctor. Let's talk about the geometry of this, because having 4 judges is highly unusual. Most combat sports use 3.
Right. The 4-judge system is specifically engineered to eliminate the problem of blind spots. In a standard 3-judge system, the officials sit on 3 sides of the ring or cage. Human bodies block sight lines.
Of course.
If a fighter throws a tight body shot or attempts a subtle wrist lock while their back is to the judges, the officials simply cannot see it. By placing 4 judges at the 4 cardinal points of the ring, RMA drastically reduces those blind spots.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, if you are watching as a fan, you know that at least one judge has a clear line of sight to the action at all times.
It feels like a direct response to the massive controversies we constantly see in boxing and MMA, the dreaded robbery decision, where the fans and the fighters feel the judges completely misread the fight.
Oh, absolutely.
RMA takes the math out of the judges' hands, too. The judges score manually, on paper. They don't look at a digital monitor, they don't check what the other judges are doing, and they don't tally the final numbers. They just observe their angle, write it down, and hand the paper to the scorekeeper.
Which enforces a strict separation of powers. The judge's only job is observation. The scorekeeper's only job is arithmetic. And sitting above them is the supervisor.
Like an overseer.
Exactly. The supervisor acts almost like an appellate judge. Positioned centrally, they review the overall bout and have the authority to intervene if there is a glaring officiating error or a misapplication of the rules. They are there to protect the integrity of the final decision.
But once the bell rings, the supervisor doesn't control the action. Inside the ropes, the referee is a dictator.
Oh, 100%.
The regulations are explicit that the referee does not need to ask permission from the judges' table to deduct a point or stop a fight. They mandate clear, loud verbal commands shouting, "Fight, stop," or "warning," and those have to be synchronized with highly specific visual hand signals.
And those visual signals are crucial because in the heat of a fight, with a screaming crowd and adrenaline pumping, a fighter might not hear a verbal command.
Right.
So if a fighter lands a clean head kick, the referee instantly raises one arm, showing 2 fingers, the V sign directed at the fighter who scored. It removes all ambiguity in real time. Both the athletes and the audience know exactly how the fight is being valued moment to moment.
But even the referee has a boss when it comes to the ultimate safety of the athletes. The rulebook assigns supreme medical authority to the ringside doctor.
The doctor's power is absolute. They can instantly stop the bout for severe bleeding, a noticeable loss of equilibrium, or any injury they deem too dangerous to allow continuation.
Wow, no arguments allowed.
None. If the doctor says the fight is over, it is over. The referee cannot overrule them, and the fighter's corner cannot argue. If you synthesize all of these elements, the four-point judging geometry, the manual scoring, the supervisor's oversight, the strict referee signaling, and the doctor's veto power, you see that this massive bureaucracy is the only reason the sport functions.
It creates a safe container.
Exactly. The athletes can fully unleash their realistic, survival-based skills specifically because they know there is an airtight safety net catching them.
So we've seen the underlying philosophy, we've broken down how they fight in that 3-round crucible, and we know exactly how they are judged. But that leads to the final and maybe most demanding piece of the puzzle. How is an RMA practitioner actually built?
This is my favorite part.
Because when we shift our focus from the competition ring to the training dojo, their belt promotion program is just a shock to the system. This martial art requires just as much rigorous academic study as it does physical conditioning.
It is a profound curriculum. It's not satisfied with the student merely mimicking movements. It demands that the practitioner comprehends the biological and mechanical reasons why a technique works.
The journey starts out somewhat traditionally, You move from the yellow belt up through orange, green, blue, and brown. It takes months of training for each stage. At the yellow belt level, the focus is foundational.
Basic flexibility, learning the mechanics of falling safely to protect your head, and 6 fundamental self-defense techniques.
Right, but the escalation is steep.
Oh, very steep. As you move into the intermediate belts, the complexity compounds rapidly. They introduce advanced takedowns, complex defenses against multiple simultaneous attackers, and weapons training. Yet by the time a student enters the red belt program, which is a mandatory 6-month phase before even attempting a black belt, they're executing flying 360-degree kicks, mastering stick and knife defense, and undergoing bone conditioning.
Wait, I have to pause on bone conditioning because that sounds terrifying to the average person. What does that actually entail in a training environment?
Well, bone conditioning relies on a biological principle known as Wolff's Law. Essentially, when you apply controlled, repeated physical stress to a bone, like striking a heavy bag, a wooden post, or even a specialized training tool, it creates microscopic fractures in the bone tissue.
Ouch.
Right. But as the body heals those microfractures, it deposits more calcium, calcifying the area and making the bones significantly denser and more resilient.
Yeah.
So an RMA fighter is literally altering their skeletal density to withstand the impact of a real-world fight without shattering their own limbs.
That is intense physical adaptation. But then you reach the threshold of the black belt. First Dan. For listeners who aren't familiar, Dan is a Japanese ranking term used in many martial arts to denote the level of a black belt.
Yeah.
Getting your first Dan in RMA represents a complete shift in expectations. The official documents state that executing techniques at 75% efficiency is no longer acceptable. You must demonstrate flawless mastery. But the physical test is only half of it. You literally have to write a research paper to get your black belt.
A minimum 15-page academic research paper.
I mean, think about that for a second. Imagine you're the fighter. You've spent years sweating on the mat, conditioning your bones, getting through the crucible of sparring, and your instructor hands you a pen and says, now write 15 pages.
It's crazy.
You have to select 5 specific combat techniques. You must write comprehensively about the training methods used to develop them, their tactical importance, the precise timing required to execute them against a moving target, and the scoring criteria associated with them in the sport.
The pedagogic and reasoning behind this requirement is brilliant, though. True mastery isn't achieved just by knowing how to throw a punch. True mastery requires understanding the mechanical and tactical why.
Like the physics of it.
Right. Why does this specific technique score a point? How does the timing of a block intersect with human reaction speeds? This level of academic depth ensures that the fighter is a conscious, thinking athlete, not just a reactive brawler.
And they don't stop at combat tactics either. They dive into human biology. The black belt requirements mandate a thorough discussion and understanding of nerve anatomy and muscle anatomy. You are required to study the human nervous system before you can tie that black belt around your waist.
Which brings us full circle back to the survival first philosophy. If you are in a dark alley trying to escape, you don't have the time or the stamina for a 10-minute boxing match.
No, you don't.
You need to neutralize the threat instantly. Let's take the common peroneal nerve as an example, which runs down the outside of the human leg.
Right, if you strike that accurately.
If you understand the anatomy well enough to deliver a precise, driving kick to that specific nerve cluster, it temporarily disrupts the motor function of the attacker's leg. Their leg literally gives out. they cannot chase you.
Wow.
By understanding anatomy, an RMA practitioner can disable an opponent with minimal effort and maximum efficiency, removing the reliance on brute strength.
And just to prove you are a well-rounded combatant, the black belt test also requires physical mastery of the katana, the traditional Japanese sword, and a demonstration of 6 improvised, on-the-spot techniques for surviving various weapon scenarios.
It is the ultimate synthesis of brawn and brains. RMA is building a practitioner who can survive a violent physical altercation, but who also possesses the deep academic understanding required to teach the system safely and accurately to the next generation of students.
When we pull back and look at all these sources together, RMA is this fascinating balancing act. It is incredibly honest. It openly acknowledges that not everything that scores a point under the bright lights of a tournament is going to save your life when you're cornered in the real world.
Yet, it deliberately uses the intense discipline, the physical conditioning, and the hyper-focused tactical awareness forged in sports training to engineer a human being who can survive that real world. The sport acts as the laboratory. The street remains the reality.
As we wrap up this deep dive, there is a core concept from RMA that I think extends far beyond martial arts, and I want you, the listener, to think about it in the context of your own life. Think about that 3-round crucible we discussed earlier, the one where you were forced to use striking, then completely switch to grappling before finally integrating everything.
It is a very revealing thought experiment to apply to daily challenges.
Absolutely. Think about the last time you faced a sudden crisis.
Yeah.
Maybe a massive problem at work or a difficult conflict in a personal relationship. How often do we rely solely on our striking? Meaning we default to our primary, most comfortable skill set. We use the tools we're best at.
Yeah, but what happens when the situation actually demands grappling? What if it demands a completely different approach, a different communication style, or a different set of tools? Too often, people just freeze. Because they aren't allowed to use their favorite technique, they become one-dimensional in their problem solving. They fail to adapt to the constraints of the new round they suddenly find themselves in.
We hide our weaknesses behind our one great strength. So the challenge for you is to actively embrace those different, uncomfortable skill sets. Study the anatomy of your own daily problems, just like an RMA black belt studies the human nervous system. Because when the alarms go off and you unexpectedly find yourself in your own version of a burning building, having a deep, adaptable understanding of the environment around you is the only way you're going to confidently find the emergency exit.